Howdy, I'm Barry Lawrence with Texas A&M's Global Supply Chain Laboratory. We have a long-term alliance with the National Association of Wholesaler-Distributors Institute in creating a knowledge base for the distribution community. Our latest work comes from a consortium we conducted a few years back called Optimizing Growth and Market Share. This book, Driving Growth, is based upon the challenges that distributors face when they go into growth processes. Now, we think about growth all of the time. It is a constant frontline issue. We're always planning for it, operating on it. Our sales force goes out every day with their mind on it. More resources are devoted to it, rightfully so, than virtually anything else. The challenge is, how do you organize growth in such a way that you make sure that you are capturing the right opportunities and that you are deploying the right capabilities to meet those opportunities? This book broke it into 3 areas. Our first area we looked at was generating growth, where we came up with 9 growth strategies. These 9 growth strategies pass through 5 growth drivers: the industry, the customer, the supplier, your sales and marketing strategy, and the sales force. From there, we looked at the best practices associated with this combination of a growth strategy and the growth drivers and the mechanisms by which we can actually grow, whether it's greenfield or acquisition or mergers or strategic alliances. These 9 growth drivers are really key and core to so much of what we think about on a day-to-day basis. We looked at such things as additional account penetration with existing customers, certainly one of the most profitable and desirable ways to grow. We also looked at other classics, new customers, new products and services, new geographies, new markets. But then we got into areas that are fascinating and sometimes even more powerful, but not so obvious, such as building new platforms, where distributors are now finding themselves bringing together different sets of capabilities in different ways in order to be able to offer a brand new offering, an offering that could be even more profitable as it embeds many different aspects of getting compensated inside many different ways of providing value to the customer. Now, that said, we also took a look at such things as value proposition innovation. The value proposition is, of course, key. It's why the customer should do business with us the way we want to do business. So it matches up opportunity, why they want to do business with us, with capability, the way we want to do business. So the value proposition and innovating the value proposition is key. It is absolutely in the forefront of what many distributors are thinking about nowadays. But that was just part 1 of this concept. Generating growth. Where most of us run into challenges is in the managing growth side. On the managing growth side, we're looking at such things as cash flow, working capital, management of these processes, management of the gross margin and net margin, and then meeting investor expectations in such a way that we can bring this out to a very positive end. So we looked at these different ways that we got our operations and our growth financed, and then we overlaid that in addition with an understanding of how to manage this with best practices. Virtually all challenges that we have faced in our work with companies, where companies ask us to come in and help them deal with something that's not working well, is almost always some sort of a growth failure, somewhere where they started a growth initiative and things went south. Finally, we look at the concept of sustaining growth and what are the systemic activities that lead to growth failures, that lead to an inability to sustain our business models. And we break those into areas of opportunity and capability. This is a very comprehensive work. We've not only been doing this work in terms of the research that we did with the consortium members, but we've now been teaching this for a couple of years, and we've been conducting many projects since the consortium came out. I believe it is the most important work that we've done to date, and I also believe that it adds tremendous value to the distribution community. I hope you will enjoy the book, and we look forward to our future work with the NAW and all of its members.
This is Senthil Gunasekaran. I'm an assistant director at Texas A&M's Distribution Research Center. The motivation for driving profitable growth book comes from a couple of directions. The first one is there are some unexplored, unanswered research questions in wholesale distribution regarding achieving profitable growth. For instance, the gross margin percentage widely varies from 7% all the way to 54% across all public distributors in the United States. Of course, their line of trade is different. That is part of the reason. Even if I look within one line of trade, for instance, industrial distribution, the gross margin percentage varies from 27.2 to 54.5%. So that's a huge variation. Why such variation exists for the companies selling the same type of product at the same locations? Questions like that are very interesting, and there are answers that relates to value proposition and many other factors as well. And some other questions to include are, there is a building materials distributor in the public space who is able to increase gross margin percentage from 18% to 29.5% over the decade while growing in double-digit rate. How they are able to do it. And there is another industrial distributor who is able to sustain 50% and above gross margin percentage over the decade while growing at above industry growth rate. Questions like this are unexplored, and they have answers which needs to be identified, which will illuminate the path to achieving sustainable profitable growth. So that was one part of the motivation. The other side is the distributor's approach to growth. Traditionally, it has been more reactive and more risk averse. The reason behind that is, for instance, the reactive approach comes because the distributors sometimes looking for the growth assistance from suppliers and customers. For instance, when they introduce new products, they introduce primarily due to pressure from their top suppliers or demand from the core customers. So they react to those growth forces rather than proactively thinking about it. And also the traditional growth strategies such as account penetration, geographic market expansion are increasingly met with limited success due to changing customer buying behavior. So things like that make distributors stick with their reactive and traditional approach to growth strategies. Obviously, in the new normal, you need more proactive and innovative approach to growth strategies, and NAW and Texas A&M joined hands to fill the space by answering those key questions, as well as to provide a playbook for distributors to generate, manage, and sustain growth. That's an important question. The differentiators, because there are a lot of growth related books in the market. I would cite 4 critical differentiators. The first one is, this is the research of its kind in wholesale distribution, first time looked at both private and public company data in order to uncover some growth best practices. And that data has been clearly exhibited throughout the study in the book. The second thing is, most of the studies in the past have been anecdotal, subjective interpretation of the account of the researchers. Whereas in this case, we looked at 10 years of data for more than 50 wholesale distribution companies, including private and public. We looked at those 10 years of income statement and balance sheet to arrive at some of the best practices to detect the best players. And the third one is, so far the growth books have primarily focused on generating the growth which is top line driven. Well, the growth for the sake of growth may not be enough, because we need to think about managing and sustaining growth from the profitability standpoint as well. So this is the book, first time we looked at 3 aspects of the growth: generating, managing, and sustaining. And the final differentiator is, When you conduct a study of this kind, you end up with a lot of findings and insights. Obviously, the executives don't have time to sit and go through all of those. So we have developed visually appealing framework, or you may call it as a wall maps, which clearly exhibit the results in a more visually appealing way. This enables the distributor's top management team to come together and have a cohesive as well as comprehensive discussion around their growth strategy and execution. So these differentiators make this book and study a little more different than the past. Thank you. Well, the benefits that you can derive from this book, especially immediately reading out of it, what you can do, it comes from three different dimensions of the growth, as I mentioned earlier. On the generating growth aspect, two immediate benefits. The first one is you will be able to map your current growth planning and execution to the 9 different growth strategies listed in the book immediately after reading the book. That will highlight the gaps, opportunities in your current scenario. The second benefit is benchmarking your growth performance over the last decade, or your critical success factors such as gross margin percentage, cash conversion cycle. For all these information, there is no open benchmarking numbers available in distribution considering over the long period of time. So this book provides that ready to understand and implement these benchmarking numbers as part of the study. As you can see from chapters 3 to 5, it provides all the financial information in a detailed way. Coming to managing growth aspect of it, the study will help you assess the alignment between your profitability and value proposition. As I mentioned earlier, there is a wide range of gross margin percentage variation in distribution. The reason being the different value proposition and capabilities they have. The distributors who exhibited double-digit growth understand this relationship between gross margin percentage and cash conversion cycle. And you will be able to assess that alignment with your company after reading the book on the managing growth. Finally, on sustaining growth, most importantly, we have not only looked at the growth performance from the positive aspect, we also looked at what are the factors, the blind spots that have been experienced by these firms when they were taking their growth journey. Because these blind spots are very expensive and we don't want to reinvent those. So we have very carefully cataloged what tripped some of the successful companies when they were aggressively growing, so that we can take a lesson or two from that to generate, manage, and sustain growth in this new normal scenario. There are a lot of sales and marketing studies out there in wholesale distribution space. Most of them focus on one or two aspects of the sales and marketing. For instance, they may go after sales force compensation or sales process or sales management and things like that. In sales and marketing, there are many moving parts that needs to be understood by a sales leadership before taking any strategic decisions. For instance, when the distributor is trying to optimize the right size of the sales force for their firm, they may go after and look at what is the salesperson to revenue or gross margin ratio, and they may try to identify what is the right number of sales force. But that will be just considering one process. Whatever the decision you take on sales force size is going to have influence on your sales force structure, which talks about how many of your salespeople are specialists versus generalists and any other variations. And also sales force size is going to influence your sales process, which is going to decide whether you are a consultative or transactional type of sales process. That has a bearing as well. And finally, your sales management is going to have an influence on your sales force size as well, because the way you deploy sales force varies, whether it is based on geographical or product based or solution driven. There are many variations. So when you decide to identify the optimal sales force size, if we do not understand the interaction with Salesforce structure, Salesforce deployment, and sales process, then we would be sub-optimizing the resources and investing the resources for a poor performance. So in light of this, we took a broader perspective to understand all the moving parts in the sales and marketing scenario for a wholesale distributor. And we identified 20 plus processes in the sales and marketing strategy and sales force design and development and maintenance of the processes. In this space, we have cataloged these processes so that a sales vice president, when he takes a decision on sales force size or any other compensation or any other decision, he can look at the interaction among the other elements so that he has a broader perspective. So that broader perspective is something very unique to the study. As you can see, the framework clearly demonstrates all the elements. The second thing I would like to mention is something very rare in the sales and marketing space is linking those sales and marketing processes to financial drivers, bringing that objectivity to sales and marketing process. That is something much more needed because most of the time the art part of the sales dominates the science aspect of it. So we try to strike a balance by bringing the objectivity to this, still keeping the art component at the right proportion. So linking sales process to shareholder value and customer service is a unique component of this study. The final one is, similar to our other studies, we have developed a visually appealing framework which captures all the findings in one wall map that helps distributors to have a cohesive and comprehensive discussion with their top management in order to come up with plans to manage sales and marketing resources for optimal deployment.